Young taxi driver gives a free ride to a crying girl. Days later, a limousine shows up and what happens next is unbelievable. Love found them. The rain poured relentlessly over the outskirts of the city, turning the narrow, poorly lit road into a slick ribbon of glistening danger. Puddles formed in jagged potholes, reflecting the flickering yellow of tired street lamps. Thunder rolled in the distance like a low growl, and the occasional flash of lightning painted ghostly silhouettes across the pavement. It was the kind of night that made people hurry home, windows shut tight, curtains drawn. But Linda had no home to hurry to. She sat curled up against the guardrail, her thin, sleeveless dress clinging to her soaked skin. Her mascara had long since streaked down her cheeks, and her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, trying to make herself smaller, invisible. Her hands trembled violently, not just from the cold, but from the fear clawing at her throat. 3 figures loomed nearby. The young men were dressed in damp hoodies and sneakers, the kind who had nothing better to do on a rainy night than cause trouble. They circled her like vultures, sensing weakness, their voices mocking, their laughter sharp and predatory. "Hey, princess," one of them said, leaning closer. "You waiting for someone, or just hoping someone like me comes along?" Another one chuckled. "Come on, sweetheart, it's a nasty night. Let us give you some company." Linda shook her head, barely able to speak. "Please, leave me alone." "Oh, she talks," the third sneered. "How about we all just hang out a little, huh?" That was when the headlights appeared. Bright, sudden, slicing through the downpour like a sword. A yellow taxi screeched to a halt just inches away, its tires splashing water across the curb. The driver's door slammed open. Jack. Tall, lean, and soaked from the rain the moment he stepped out, Jack's presence was immediate and commanding. His face was tight with concern and something else, something dangerous to anyone who dared cross him. "Back off," he barked, stepping between Linda and the men. "She said leave her alone," the lead thug laughed. "What's this, night in a yellow chariot?" Jack didn't blink. "You've got 5 seconds." The tension spiked. One of the men looked ready to test him, but then saw the fire in Jack's eyes, the unwavering stance, the clenched fists. "Not worth it." They scoffed, muttered curses, and backed off into the shadows. When they were gone, Jack turned to Linda, his voice immediately softer. "Are you okay?" She nodded numbly, though her lips were too pale to say the words. Her entire body was shaking now, her fingers frozen. "Come on," Jack said gently. "Let's get you out of the rain." He helped her to her feet, one hand steady on her back, the other holding an umbrella he had yanked from the passenger seat. He opened the door for her, and she climbed in without protest, clutching herself tightly. The interior of the taxi was warm, a stark contrast to the night outside. She sank into the seat, silent, her eyes fixed on the blurry city lights through the window. Jack slid into the driver's seat, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Where to?" he asked. I don't know," she murmured. "I don't have any money. I just needed to get away." Jack paused for a moment, then turned the key and started driving. "I didn't ask about your wallet," he said, eyes on the road. "I asked where you need to go." She didn't answer right away. For a while, they drove in silence, the windshield wipers keeping rhythm with the rain. Finally, in a voice barely louder than the storm, she whispered, "Just somewhere quiet, somewhere no one will find me tonight." Jack nodded. "I know a place." They pulled into a small park on the edge of town, where trees bent in the wind and the path lamps glowed dim but steady. The rain had eased into a drizzle. Jack parked under a tree and turned off the engine. He didn't look back at her, didn't push for details. He just handed her a pack of tissues and sat with her in the quiet. She took a deep breath, wiped her face, then turned to him. "Why did you stop?" He shrugged. "You looked like you needed someone to." She stared at him for a long time, then said, "Thank you. You're the first person tonight who didn't ask me who I was, just if I was okay." Jack met her gaze in the mirror. That's all that mattered. And in that moment, under the gray sky and flickering street lamps, something unspoken passed between them. Something quiet, something fragile, something that neither of them understood yet. But it had begun. The windshield wipers hummed softly as Jack drove through the rain-soaked streets, heading away from the chaos and deeper into the quiet edges of the city. In the rearview mirror, he glanced occasionally at Linda, curled in the back seat, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her mascara had stained her cheeks, her lips trembled, and though she tried to compose herself, the sobs kept coming in broken waves. She never said what had happened. Jack did not press. He just drove, letting the silence cradle her as much as the warmth of the cab. His fingers tapped gently against the steering wheel, not from impatience, but from a desire to do something, anything that might offer comfort. "Is there somewhere safe I can take you?" he asked eventually, voice low and steady. Linda nodded faintly. "A park, just somewhere quiet. I don't want to go home." He didn't ask why. He simply nodded, turned left, and took her to a place he often visited himself when the noise of the world became too much. A little city park, tucked behind a row of closed cafes and darkened bookstores. The kind of place few people remembered after nightfall. When he pulled in near the entrance, he turned off the engine but left the lights on low. The rain had lightened to a gentle drizzle, the city around them hushed and half asleep. Linda sat still for a long moment, then finally broke the silence. "You didn't ask me any questions." Jack looked at her reflection in the mirror. "Didn't seem like you needed any." Her eyes filled again, not with panic this time, but something else. Relief, maybe. She sniffled, wiped her face with the tissue he had given her earlier, and slowly opened the door. Before stepping out, she paused, leaning forward slightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice fragile but sincere. "You're the first person tonight who didn't want something from me. You just helped. You were kind." Jack gave her a small nod. "Take care of yourself, Linda." She stepped out into the mist, her figure illuminated briefly by the soft yellow light from the taxi before she disappeared into the shadows of the trees. And just like that, she was gone. Jack sat for a moment, staring at the space she had left behind, then slowly started the engine and pulled away. He did not expect to see her again. He did not even know her last name, but her presence lingered, her voice, her sadness, her thank you. Over the next few days, he found himself thinking about her more than he expected. He kept glancing at the back seat whenever he started a shift, as if expecting her to be there, curled up in silence. Something about her had settled inside him, an ache he couldn't quite explain. Then, 4 days later, it happened. He had just dropped off a passenger in the business district and was pulling away from the curb when a sleek black limousine rolled to a stop directly in front of his taxi. The contrast between the two vehicles was stark, his weathered cab and the polished, chauffeur-driven luxury vehicle. Jack blinked in surprise as the driver of the limo stepped out, holding a small white envelope. He approached Jack's window and handed it through the crack. "For you," the driver said. "Miss Linda requests your presence. Tomorrow evening, 7 p.m., 17 Evergreen Lane." Jack opened the envelope and found a simple card inside. Handwritten in elegant looping script were the words, "I'd like to thank you properly. You were there when no one else was. Linda." He stared at the card for a long moment, then looked back at the limousine. It was already pulling away, and Jack knew, whatever this was, it was far from over. The next evening, just before sunset, Jack found himself pulling his taxi onto Evergreen Lane, a tree-lined street that seemed miles removed from the world he knew. At the end of the cul-de-sac stood a towering iron gate, which opened slowly as he approached, revealing a sprawling estate bathed in golden light. He parked just outside the circle driveway, feeling strangely out of place among the manicured hedges and luxury cars. Before he could even step out, a valet opened his door with a courteous nod and gestured toward the entrance. Jack adjusted his jacket, worn but clean, and walked toward the grand double doors, his heart pounding harder with every step. As he reached the top of the steps, the door opened, and there she was. Linda, but this Linda was not the rain-soaked girl trembling in the back seat of his cab. She stood tall and composed, in a cream-colored silk dress, her hair softly curled, makeup subtle and flawless. She looked like someone out of a magazine, and for a moment Jack wondered if he had made a mistake. But then she smiled. "Hi, Jack," she said softly. "I'm glad you came." He gave a hesitant nod. "You look different," she chuckled. "I feel different too. Come in." He followed her through the expansive foyer, past gleaming floors and chandeliers. They settled into a cozy dining room that, despite its size, felt surprisingly warm. A table for two had been set near the window, candles flickering gently between them. Dinner was already served, roasted vegetables, seared salmon, and fresh-baked bread. Jack looked at the setup, then back at her. "I didn't expect this," he said quietly. Linda poured 2 glasses of water, then sat across from him. "I didn't expect you either," she replied. "But I'm glad you came. There's something I need to explain." Jack waited. She took a deep breath, her gaze drifting to the window before returning to him. "My full name is Linda Fairchild. I'm the only daughter of Richard Fairchild, CEO of Fairchild Global. You've probably seen the name on a building or two." Jack blinked. "You're that Fairchild?" She nodded. "And the night you found me, I was supposed to be at an engagement party, an arranged one. My father was marrying me off to a business partner's son. It was all about strategy, legacy, image." Her voice tightened. "But the man was a liar, a cheater, and I refused to become part of another business deal dressed up as a wedding." Jack leaned forward slightly, his voice calm. "So you ran?" "I ran," she said. "I left in the middle of the rain, no phone, no driver, just me and a lot of mascara." Jack couldn't help but smile. "You picked a rough night for it." Linda smiled back. "And I would have kept running if you hadn't stopped. You didn't know who I was, didn't ask for anything. You just saw me." Jack looked down, uneasy under her gaze. "You seemed like someone who needed a place to breathe." "I did. You gave me that. And more." She paused. "That's why I wanted to thank you, properly." She reached under the table and placed a white envelope on the surface between them. Jack glanced at it, then shook his head gently. "If that's money, I can't take it." "It's not charity," she said quickly. "It's gratitude." "I wasn't helping you for anything in return," he said firmly. "It just felt right." Linda studied him for a long moment, then slowly pulled the envelope back. "You really are different." Jack shrugged. "I'm just me." She smiled again, softer now. "Then let's eat, as two people. Not a Fairchild, not a taxi driver, just us." And for the first time, Jack relaxed. He picked up his fork, and as they shared stories over dinner and laughter slowly replaced formality, the distance between their two worlds seemed, if only for a while, to fade into nothing at all. In the days that followed, Linda reached out to Jack again, not with formal invitations or private drivers, but with a simple text. "Want to go for a ride? Just me, just freedom." That was how it began. Jack became her unofficial getaway driver. Whenever the weight of her world grew too heavy, she'd call, and he'd show up in his old yellow cab, ready to take her anywhere that felt far away from expectations and pressure. There was no schedule, no destination, just two people, carving out pieces of the world where they could breathe. Their first escape was to a food truck tucked behind a warehouse downtown. They ate grilled cheese sandwiches on the hood of his taxi, paper napkins blowing in the wind, laughing at how Linda couldn't remember the last time she had eaten something off a paper plate. Another day, she convinced Jack to rent 2 bikes from a shabby shop near the riverfront. They rode through the park, laughing as Linda almost fell trying to swerve around a squirrel. She wore jeans and a baseball cap, no makeup, no filters, just her, real and free. They made up games. One of their favorites was guessing people's jobs as they passed by. "That guy? Definitely a dentist," Linda would say. "No one smiles that wide unless they sell it for a living." Jack pointed at another. "See her boots? Librarian, but the kind who reads crime novels after hours." The more time they spent together, the more the walls between them crumbled. Linda opened up about her childhood, the loneliness in a house full of staff, the pressure to be perfect, the years of being told who to be and how to act. Jack listened without judgment. He shared stories of growing up in a working-class neighborhood, learning to fix cars from his dad, and dreaming of seeing more than just the same streets every day. Linda laughed more. Jack smiled more. They talked about nothing and everything, often losing track of time until the city lights flickered on. Then came the night of the fireworks. It was a local festival neither of them planned to attend, but they stumbled upon it during one of their spontaneous drives. Jack pulled the car into an empty field just outside the park where the fireworks were about to begin. They sat on the hood, a blanket between them, the evening air cool and buzzing with excitement. As the first bursts of color lit up the sky, Linda tilted her head back and sighed. "This is the first time in years I feel like I'm not performing." Jack glanced at her, the light from the explosions reflecting in her eyes. "Maybe this is who you really are." She turned to him and smiled. "And who are you, Jack?" He hesitated. "Someone who's trying not to fall for someone way out of his league." Linda laughed, but it wasn't mocking. It was soft, surprised, touched. A few moments passed in silence, then, as another firework crackled above them, their hands accidentally brushed on the blanket. Jack froze. Linda didn't move. He glanced down, then quickly pulled his hand back. "Sorry." She looked at him for a moment, her smile returning, gentle, understanding. "Don't be." Jack turned away, face flushed, heart pounding. He didn't say another word for the rest of the show, but Linda didn't need him to. That small, quiet moment had already said more than words ever could. The headlines hit like a tidal wave. Heiress on the run, billionaire's daughter caught slumming with taxi driver. From mansions to mufflers, who is the mystery man? Linda Fairchild's secret romance, love or rebellion. The media frenzy was immediate, merciless, and everywhere. Paparazzi photos flooded newsstands, blogs, and social feeds. There was Linda in jeans and a baseball cap, her arm brushing against Jack's. Another shot showed them laughing over sandwiches at a street cart. One especially viral image captured the two sitting on the hood of his taxi, legs dangling, heads tilted slightly toward one another under the soft glow of streetlights. It was meant to be sweet. Now, under the weight of scrutiny, it felt like evidence. The photo made headlines for its intimacy, dissected by every commentator with a keyboard and an opinion. Some romanticized the story, a modern Cinderella, a heartwarming escape from privilege. Others called it reckless, irresponsible, a publicity stunt. Jack first saw the coverage on a flickering TV screen mounted behind the counter of a gas station. He had stopped to grab a coffee between shifts, and there, splashed across the news, was his face, his cab, his moment with Linda. His stomach twisted. Not from fear, from knowing exactly what came next. By the time he checked his phone, it was a mess of missed calls, voicemails, and numbers he didn't recognize. His name was everywhere. Blogs guessed his background. Some painted him as a hero, others as a gold digger. No one asked him anything directly. But the silence that mattered most was Linda's. Her phone, once a lifeline of quiet texts and sudden invitations, was silent now. No, "Want to get coffee?" No, "Let's drive somewhere no one knows us?" No, "I miss the quiet with you." What Jack didn't know was that just hours after the story broke, Linda had been summoned back to the Fairchild estate like a soldier reporting for war. The moment she stepped through the marble foyer, the doors slammed shut behind her. Her phone was taken, her access cut. Her father paced his study like a man betrayed, not by the press, but by his own daughter. "You've humiliated this family," he spat, voice rising. "Gallivanting around the city with a taxi driver. Do you have any idea what the board is saying? What the press is doing to our name?" Linda stood her ground, chin raised, though her heart pounded like thunder. "They're saying I'm human, and maybe that's exactly what this family needs." Her father's face turned a deeper shade of red. "He's using you." "No," she snapped. "He's the only one who's never asked for anything from me." His jaw clenched. "This ends now." The next morning, Jack received a letter, hand-delivered, thick embossed paper, an invitation, no, a summons, to Fairchild Global's downtown headquarters. He almost tossed it, almost stayed home, but something deep inside told him to go, to face this, whatever it was, head on. He arrived in his cleanest clothes, a worn but ironed shirt, jeans without holes, scuffed boots polished as best he could. Security ushered him through sleek marble floors and up to a room made entirely of glass and cold metal. The city stretched out behind it like a kingdom, and at the head of the conference table sat the king, Richard Fairchild, flanked by lawyers, unsmiling, calculated. One of them slid a manila envelope across the table. "This," the man said smoothly, "is a gesture of gratitude in exchange for your discretion and your cooperation in removing yourself from Miss Fairchild's life. No press, no contact, no complications." Jack stared at the envelope. He didn't move. "And if I don't take it?" he asked, calm but steady. Mr. Fairchild leaned forward, voice like ice. "Then I ensure you never drive in this city again. Licenses, permits, reputation, gone. I will make one call." Jack finally reached for the envelope, not to open it but to push it gently back. "I didn't help your daughter because I thought it would get me anything," he said. "I helped her because she looked like she was drowning. I didn't know who she was. I didn't care." Fairchild's nostrils flared. "You think you can actually belong in her world?" "I don't need to belong to her world," Jack said, standing. "I just need to be worthy of her. And you don't get to decide that." He turned toward the door, pausing just once. "You can buy silence, but you can't buy love, and you sure as hell can't kill it with a check." He walked out. The envelope remained on the table, unopened. That night, Jack climbed the stairs to the rooftop of his apartment building. The wind was sharp, the city lights blinking below like a language only he could read. Somewhere out there, behind thick walls and locked gates, Linda was watching the same sky. He sat on the edge of the building looking out, letting the silence settle around him like armor. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew this much. He would wait, and when the moment came, he would be ready. Jack disappeared. No messages, no calls. No sign of him anywhere in the city he had driven through every day. His taxi was no longer parked outside his usual diner. The garage he sometimes worked part-time at said he had quit. His apartment, vacated, no forwarding address. Linda tried everything. She called every cab company in town, sent emails, even drove herself through the neighborhoods he had once shown her. But it was as if the night had swallowed him whole. Her father assumed it was over. That silence meant surrender, but Linda knew better. One sleepless night, sitting in the quiet of her childhood room, surrounded by things that never felt like hers, she opened her laptop and began to write. Not as the heiress, not as the woman behind headlines, just as a girl who had once been cold, alone, and rescued by someone who expected nothing. She titled the post, "The Rain and the Man Who Saved Me." She told everything, the night she ran, the fear in the alley, the moment Jack stopped his cab and shielded her without asking who she was, their late-night adventures, the sandwiches, the fireworks, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her like she was just a girl, not a name. "I don't know where he is now," she wrote in the final paragraph, "but if you see him, tell him I still remember the silence in the cab, the safety in his presence, and how he never once asked for anything in return. Tell him I miss him." She hit publish and closed the laptop. By morning, the blog post had gone viral. Thousands of comments poured in. Strangers around the world shared the story. News sites picked it up, talk shows referenced it, and people speculated everywhere. A week later, Linda received an invitation to appear on a live morning television show. The host promised to focus on the story, not the scandal. She agreed. Dressed simply in a blue blouse, her hair tucked behind her ears, she sat under the studio lights and recounted the story one more time for the cameras. "I didn't fall in love with a fairy tale," she said. "I found something real, and I lost it because of fear." The host leaned in. "If he were watching now, what would you say?" Linda turned to the camera, her voice barely a whisper. "I'd say, come back." Silence followed. Then a murmur rippled through the audience. A shadow moved in the far aisle. Linda turned, her breath catching. There he was, Jack, still in his simple jacket, hair a little longer, eyes as steady as ever. He looked unsure, slightly out of place, but very real. The audience gasped. The host stood. Linda didn't. She didn't need to. She ran past the cameras, past the lights, straight into his arms. The room erupted in applause, but for a moment it was just them. "I read it," Jack said quietly. Linda clung to him. "I meant every word." And just like that, the silence between them was broken, not by a grand speech, but by something far stronger. A return. The applause still echoed through the studio, swelling like a tide, wave after wave of clapping and cheers that filled every inch of the room. The audience was on their feet, some with tears in their eyes, some simply smiling wide as they watched Linda wrap her arms tightly around Jack on the stage. Cameras clicked wildly, flashes igniting like tiny fireworks, but neither of them noticed. The spotlight could have vanished completely and they still wouldn't have cared. For Linda, the only thing that existed in that moment was the feel of Jack's heartbeat beneath her hands. Steady, real, familiar in a world that often felt manufactured. Her breath caught in her throat, and when she finally pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, they were just as she remembered, gentle, grounded, and filled with something she hadn't dared hope for again. "If you leave again," she whispered, her voice shaking, "then you'd better take me with you this time." Jack gave a soft chuckle, the kind that came from deep in his chest, full of quiet relief and affection. He rested his forehead gently against hers and said, low and certain, "I won't leave, not again." And somehow those words anchored them. They stood there unmoving, as if the rest of the world had melted into background noise. The audience, the cameras, the lights all faded, leaving only the two of them in a stillness that felt sacred. No scripts, no headlines, just truth. The host stepped forward slowly, her voice breaking through the hush with care. "Well," she said, smiling, "I think we've all just witnessed something very real." Jack and Linda turned toward the audience, still holding each other's hands, as if letting go would unravel everything they'd fought to find again. Jack cleared his throat, glancing down for a second before looking up, eyes steady. "I didn't come here for the spotlight," he said. "Honestly, I didn't even want to come at first. But if this moment, this story, can remind even one person that love doesn't care about last names or bank accounts or where you came from, then I guess being here was worth it." The crowd erupted again, louder this time, not just in applause but in something more, a kind of collective exhale, as if they too had needed this reminder. After the broadcast, the internet lit up again, but this time it wasn't scandal, it was celebration. Headlines changed their tone. Linda Fairchild's second chance at real love. Taxi driver's loyalty moves millions. Love wins where money fails. Videos of the moment flooded social media. Hashtags like Jack and Linda and Real Love trended for days. Even celebrities chimed in, praising the couple's honesty, their courage, their refusal to play by the rules of privilege and appearance. Of course, not everyone approved. The usual tabloids tried to spin it into something cheap. Critics whispered about image control. High society circles exchanged knowing glances and muttered disapproval over champagne. But none of it mattered, because for the first time, Linda and Jack didn't have to hide, and they weren't going to. The following week, they sat down for their first public interview together. The set was modest, the tone intimate. No drama, no glamour. Just two chairs, one hand resting over the other. They spoke about that rainy night, the fear, the silence in the cab, the way Jack had never once asked who she was. "He didn't save me because he knew my name," Linda said, looking directly into the camera. "He saved me because he saw someone in pain and chose to help. That's the man I love." Jack, quieter, his hand still entwined with hers, nodded. "I never believed I was enough. For her world. But she never asked me to be anything other than myself. And that's what love does. It makes you believe you belong." From that moment on, they walked forward not as a scandal, not as an accident of fate, but as something more, a choice, a promise. Whatever came next, they would face it hand in hand, side by side. 1 year later, the yellow taxi was still running, but this time, It bore a new name across its sides in bold, cheerful letters: Taxi of Hope. The idea had started with a single conversation between Jack and Linda, sitting on the couch of their small apartment, sipping tea and watching the city lights flicker outside their window. Jack had said, "I wish more people could feel safe just stepping into a car," and Linda had replied, "Then let's give them that." From there, the plan took root and grew. Taxi of Hope became a free service for the people most often overlooked: elderly individuals trying to get to doctor's appointments, pregnant women needing a ride to the hospital, struggling families just needing transport they could trust. The first cab was Jack's, of course, the same one that had stopped for a girl in the rain. Then came a second, then a third, donated by those moved by their story. Mechanics volunteered to help, local shops offered discounts, and more drivers signed on, not for pay, but for purpose. Linda handled the logistics, the fundraising, the website. She refused to use her father's name to push the program. "This isn't a charity," she'd say, "it's a thank you." They lived in a modest apartment on the third floor of a brownstone, with creaky stairs and a stubborn heater in winter. The space was filled with plants, coffee mugs with mismatched handles, and shelves stacked with books and memories. Jack still made breakfast every morning. Linda still made fun of how he folded laundry. And every night, they curled up with the kind of peace neither of them had ever known before. When it came time for their wedding, they agreed on one thing: no ballroom, no tuxedos, no golden invitations. Instead, they got married in the park where they had first shared silence. The ceremony was simple: folding chairs, a few strings of lights, and guests who had all, at one point or another, been passengers in Jack's taxi. There was Mrs. Holloway, the 82-year-old he used to drive to her eye appointments. There was Carla, the single mom who called Jack in labor when she had no one else. And there was a little girl named Ava, who once left her stuffed rabbit in the back seat, only for Jack to drive it back across town the same night. Each guest came with a story, a tear, a smile. Each one brought a flower, and together they created a bouquet that Linda carried down the aisle. Jack waited under the tree where they once watched fireworks, wearing a simple gray suit. Linda wore a white dress she had sewn parts of by hand, nothing fancy, but stitched with meaning. When the vows were spoken, Jack's voice cracked. "I don't promise perfect," he said, "but I promise real." And Linda, eyes brimming, replied, "You gave me something I never knew I needed, a reason to believe in someone again." They kissed to the sound of cheers and bird song, and the city humming quietly around them. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the world turned golden, they sat together on the hood of the taxi that started it all. Linda leaned into Jack's shoulder, her hand resting gently over his heart. She looked out at the horizon and said softly, "I used to think I needed an empire." That love had to come with chandeliers and diamonds and a last name everyone respected. She paused, smiling. But that night in the rain, I realized all I ever needed was someone brave enough to stop. Someone who saw me, not who I was but who I could be. Jack didn't say anything. He just took her hand and held it like he never planned to let go. And so from one rainy night and a simple act of courage, a love story was born. Not in grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but in quiet kindness, shared strength, and the beauty of two hearts choosing each other against all odds. Because sometimes, the greatest journeys begin not with a destination, but with a single moment of humanity, when someone decides to stop. If this story moved you, made you believe in love again, or simply reminded you that compassion still exists in this world, please consider subscribing to Soul-Stirring Stories. Here, every tale is a journey to the heart. Click subscribe, and let us bring you stories that heal, inspire, and stay with you long after the final word. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes one small act of kindness can change a life forever.